Hi, everybody. Well, I'm going to do something a little different today. I know this is around the time of year that Spotify Wrapped comes out, and we all look back on the music we listened to throughout the year. So, what I thought I would do is go through 10 albums that are among my favorites of all time. I'm not going to necessarily rank them from 10 to 1 because I think any given day or any given week or month, I could probably identify any one of these as my favorite. It sort of just depends on what mood I'm in, but I will say that all of these albums were influential in my music taste and were sort of soundtracks of different times in my life. So what I'm going to do is go through them roughly chronologically for when in my life I listened to them a lot. So not necessarily the order in which they were released, but more so when I discovered them and really went through a moment with them, if you will. So here we go, 10 of my favorite albums. And the first one is Nirvana's Nevermind. This is the second studio album by Nirvana, but I think widely considered their most successful. It's got Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is probably their biggest hit, and also Come As You Are and Lithium, which are also pretty big hits. I would say Nirvana is one of the first bands I really feel like I discovered when I was in high school, around my freshman, sophomore year of high school, and sort of the first music that I kind of found on my own. It wasn't music that was, influenced by my parents or any other people that I might have looked to for pop culture recommendations. It kind of just found me independently, and it definitely played to my teenage angst, as it did, I think, for so many teenagers when it came out. I am a little younger than the album. I discovered it some years later, but definitely a soundtrack to mid-high school for me. So, Nirvana's Nevermind. Great album. And an album I discovered later in high school, more of my senior year, maybe into my freshman year of college. 40 Ounce to Freedom by Sublime. Sublime is sort of a ska punk band, but they also blend a lot of hip-hop and reggae, a real eclectic combination of genres, and they do them all very well in very catchy songs. I loved this album. I discovered it after I got my driver's license, and it was frequently in rotation when I was driving around with friends, getting into trouble on Friday and Saturday nights. And for the most part, getting into trouble was, just going out to get fast food and driving around. I was not too much of a troublemaker, really, but so this is the debut album from Sublime. Came out actually not too far after Nirvana's album, but definitely a different sort of vibe to it. Much more of an upbeat, fun sort of party vibe for the most part. A lot of songs that you might want to listen to on the beach. Sublime is from Long Beach, California. And I remember when I listened to this album, I dreamed of moving to LA and, living that beach lifestyle. That's what these tunes inspired me to want to do. So I never ended up moving out there, but I did get to visit, and it's a cool area, and this album is a good soundtrack to that sort of Southern California lifestyle. So, Sublime's 40 Ounce to Freedom. Next, I would say the Beatles' Revolver. I would probably identify it as my favorite Beatles album. It's the 7th album by the Beatles. Some of the hits on it include Eleanor Rigby, Yellow Submarine. Yellow Submarine is probably my least favorite song on the album, even though it's one of the best-known Beatles songs, probably. But I love Taxman, I'm Only Sleeping, Good Day Sunshine, She Said might be one of my favorite Beatles songs ever. This album was maybe the soundtrack to my freshman year of college. I was playing a lot of music at the time. I play guitar, and I was in a band in high school and into early college, and I just really admired the songwriting of really the Beatles all around, but this album in particular sort of, I think, exemplifies their songwriting chops, and a really good blend of, rock and pop and even a little, psychedelic sound that comes out here. It came out in 1966, so I feel like Revolver really bridges sort of the old poppy Beatles of the early 60s and when they got sort of more experimental later in the decade. So, number 8, Revolver by the Beatles. Number 7, an album I discovered sort of in the middle of college, was Rilo Kiley's Under the Black Light. Rilo Kiley is sort of an indie pop band led by Jenny Lewis, who has a really just very pleasant pop voice. And all the songs are really catchy, great melodies, good guitar riffs. I like that clean electric guitar. This was definitely an album I was spinning a lot in the summer. It was summer when I kind of discovered it, several years after it was released. But so I don't know if the songs are necessarily inherently summery, but I associate it with summer. Very, just for the most part, upbeat, catchy, fun songs, and Moneymaker, Silver Lining, and Breaking Up are a couple of the, I would say, semi-hits off of it. I don't know if any of them were ever big hits, but in the indie pop world, I think those were songs that gained some popularity. So really all of them are really well done and catchy. So number 7, Rilo Kiley, Under the Black Light. Another album I liked a lot in college was Radiohead's In Rainbows. In Rainbows is the 7th studio album by Radiohead. I think, on some level, maybe one of their more poppy albums. Not quite as experimental as, like, Kid A, for example, and not quite as, just straight rock as OK Computer. Songs like House of Cards and Nude and All I Need, more, soft, kind of slower rock poppy songs. Almost kind of a dark tone to the album overall. It's not necessarily uplifting or something you'd put on at a party necessarily, but when I was a moody 19, 20-year-old, it definitely spoke to me. So I really like all of these songs. I feel like there's a song for just about every mood really on the album. I mean, Body Snatchers is definitely an upbeat song that you could go for a run to, and then Fostarp has a beautiful string interlude in it. So Radiohead In Rainbows is album number 6 on my list. And moving along, I got really into the album Joy by Phish. If I was including live albums on this list, there would definitely be a couple Phish albums in the mix. I'm keeping this list to studio albums, but I have seen Phish several times in concert. I would say, in my opinion, they're the greatest live band ever. But Joy, their studio album, was also definitely heavy in the rotation for me. It is their 12th studio album, but the first one they released after their 5-year hiatus from 2004 to 2009. They came out with this album, so it was pretty highly anticipated amongst the Phish community, and many of these songs have become staples at their live shows. But it opens up with Backwards Down the Number Line, which has an excellent guitar solo, but really, all the songs are really catchy and upbeat for the most part. And even if you're not typically into jam bands, but you like just soft, sort of classic sounding, almost poppy rock and roll, I would recommend you check out Joy by Phish. So that is number 5. Number 4, this was more of a late college album for me, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West. I know Kanye's been in the news lately with some questionable comments. I always try to separate the art from the artist, and I really do think Kanye is a musical genius, and I know he will remind anyone who forgets it himself, but this was his fifth album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and it has a lot of well-known songs on it. All of the Lights, Power. Both songs I feel like are often played at sports arenas. Really good pump-up songs. Monster was a huge hit with Jay-Z and Rick Ross and Nicki Minaj. It's also got Lost in the World, which is a great collab with Bon Iver. When I moved off campus toward the end of college and lived in a house, and we threw the occasional party, this album was one that we would always put on, and it would play all the way through, and every song was upbeat, or at least, a good, had a pretty good party vibe to it, just about every song, and a lot of fond memories with this album in the background. So, Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Jumping ahead a little bit to an album that actually came out way back in 2001, but I discovered it in the early months of the COVID pandemic. It is The Grand Pecking Order by Oysterhead, and it's actually the only studio album from Oysterhead, and this is a supergroup with Trey Anastasio, the guitarist from Fish, Les Claypool, the bassist from Primus, and Stuart Copeland, the drummer of The Police. So those three guys got together to make this album, The Grand Pecking Order, and it really features, you can tell each band member contributes something. There's a lot of songs that are very sort of fishy. You can tell Trey was kind of the main force behind, and then some songs that remind me a lot of Primus. And I think, the drum influence is really felt throughout. A lot of sort of complex rhythms that Stu Copeland contributes. But yeah, this album definitely got me through some of the early stress and uncertainty of the pandemic. I just happened to discover it around then, but a real eclectic sound on here. Some more chill songs and some more upbeat, rocky songs, but and some, kind of some funny, quirky songs too. Armies on Ecstasy is a great song. Oz is Ever Floating, I actually feel like it reminds me of something that could be on Revolver. It almost sounds very, mid-60s Lennon McCartney. So I definitely would recommend this album. I think there's really something for everyone on here. The Grand Pecking Order by Oysterhead. And second to last, we have Pony by Orville Peck. This album came out in 2019, but it was really like early 2022 that I kind of discovered it. I first heard the song Dead of Night, and that got me interested in looking up more from Orville Peck, and really this whole album is awesome. Orville Peck's got an awesome voice, just like a mesmerizing voice, and he has an incredible range. It's country, but not your typical country. And I like some classic country music, but I would say Orville Peck doesn't have the twang that you hear from a lot of modern country. And it's much sort of darker, almost gothic in a sense. same time incredibly melodic and, you know, energetic in some parts and more chill in others. He's a real interesting guy. He performs with a mask on, so, you know, sort of just a real mysterious persona. But just about every song on this album, Dead of Night is great. Turn to Hate, Queen of the Rodeo, Roses Are Falling are just a few of my favorites, but the whole album really is fantastic. On some level, I feel like this is the album that I got into in what I guess you might consider the last couple months of the pandemic, and just as things were returning to normal. You know, I feel like this was the album I was spinning a lot, so kind of associate it with coming out the other side of a difficult time. Pony by Orville Peck. And last is an album that came out this year. Came out over the summer. Austin, the 5th studio album from Post Malone. I think Post Malone has had a couple really good albums. I really liked Beer Bongs and Bentleys, and I liked his debut album, Stoney, as well. But this one, when it first came out, there were a couple weeks where this was just about all I listened to. I feel like every song has a real, original sort of sound to it. It's real distinct, I suppose, from every other song on the album. There's not necessarily like one sound to it. Some songs are, more upbeat and poppy. Some feature an acoustic guitar and are a little slower. It's not quite as hip-hoppy as some other Post Malone albums, but there are certainly elements of that as well. You have a song like Something Real that features a full choir, and then a song like Speedometer that's almost got kind of an 80s vibe to it. Green Thumb is pretty much just him on the acoustic. So another album where there's really something for everybody. All the songs are super catchy. One of those where every time I listened, I felt like I had a new favorite because they're all just really good. So definitely probably the album of the year for me personally. Austin by Post Malone. So again, not necessarily my 10 favorite albums in order, not even necessarily my top 10 of all time, but definitely 10 albums that I can say defined certain periods of time in my life and that have been, influential for my evolving music taste. So I'd recommend you check out all of them, and feel free to shoot me a comment and let me know if you've listened to any of these albums and what you think of them. And I hope you enjoyed this video. So thanks so much for listening, and take care. Bye-bye.